Take a couple. We're chewing up some time here.
Okay, you good?
All right. 7 o'clock planning board time. Let's see, under general business, the first thing we have are the minutes from the March 11th meeting. I'm hoping everyone got a chance to read them, and I'll take a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve them, the minutes, the March 11th.
Good, got a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any corrections?
That I saw.
Okay, okay. Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? And everyone was here, so you got a 6-0-0, Jen. Filings. There's a filing for Cut and Drop Wholesale Gutter Company, Wedgewood Farm on Osby Road. Is there an address for Wedgewood Farm?
Cut and Drop is at 222 Whitens Road, and Wedgewood Farm is 128, 141, and 142 Armsby Road. Pretty much the three parcels that are up against 146, and the ones on the north of Armsby Road surround the Enchanted Passage bookstore.
Okay. And we need to endorse Prime Metals and 85 Gilmore subdivision.
That one actually we're gonna table, because they're just making sure they have, we met with the water district today to make sure they're tying in the water, showing the water lines tying in the appropriate locations. So they wanna make sure those lines are pinned down in the right locations in relation to that new retaining wall you approved before we sign it. So we'll just table that to the next meeting, just to make sure we get it right.
Okay. There are no Form A plans,
There are none.
and Snow Road construction is continued.
Yeah, they've requested a continuance on that. I did talk to the fire chief, I did talk to the highway super, I did talk to town council, I gave you a copy of that case law,
Yeah, I was reading that.
and related plans. I can give you an update on what I know right now, or we can just, wait until the next meeting, whatever you wanna do.
Give us an update. Snow Road, where is Snow Road? Is,
Snow Road, here, I'm gonna do that, show you the map.
it's in Manchog.
Yeah, it's in Manchog, so you're coming down Putnam Hill Road, heading towards the four-way intersection in the middle of Manchog. You kinda go around the interesting corner at Tucker Pond, and, you'll start to see mill worker housing on your left-hand side, all the little ones right in a row.
Mhm.
And it's pretty much your first,
Left.
it's your first left that you recognize. There is another little left in there, Summer Street, but it's the first one you recognize.
Okay.
It is a public way. That was the first thing I verified with the highway super. It's on our chapter 90 road list. The only portion of it, obviously, that's on the road list is the portion that's built out. We do have an article for the acceptance of the roadway. The attorney for the potential client is in the process of locating the map that goes with that acceptance. But the highway superintendent has said, you know, this public roadway, we maintain it. If you decide it can be built out, we'll just push the snow further. And that was pretty much his entire input on that. All right, push the snow right here now. If you decide it gets built out, I'll push the snow up here, and we're fine. The fire chief said, you know, he has no opinion on whether it can be built out or can't be built out, but if it is built out, he would like the full length of the right-of-way paved. He said he would consider the last 20 or 30 feet could be gravel, but he wants enough distance to lay in a pumper truck and a ladder truck outside or away from the house, any potential house, the one that exists and one that would go on the lot. So, if at all possible, he'd like the board to order the whole rest of the right-of-way paved out, but at least another 30 to 40 feet, and then the rest needs to be compacted gravel. So that was the input from both of those. Town council, I did tell him about the case law that was cited, and he said there are one or two things in that case that are germane to this, but the immediate facts of that case are not the same as the situation we're looking at here. He said in his opinion, the only thing to think about here is whether you consider it a public way or the remaining layout private, which just leads you to two different approval processes for an upgrade. But we both agreed that really the person who's requesting, if kind of the burden is on them to tell us why they believe they have the ability to upgrade that, and then he'll just review that and respond on that, or respond to that. But he said no, he did not have any, he did not think it was something that would be prohibited, that there would just be a particular process for it. And like we said, when we reviewed the case together, the Tatton Curling case together, and the plans that I do have in the file on those, it's not the same situation, it's not the same kind of plan, the strips that are talked about are not the same types of strips. So it's not directly germane, so, that was his initial input. So, but again, we will get something in writing from the proponents' legal side, and town council will review that and then provide you, kind of guidance on that. So, to that end, and I've requested that from the applicant, and which is, we do have an email from them, Mr. Chairman does, requesting a discussion be continued to April 8th on that.
Right, the email says, please accept this email as a formal request to continue the above referenced item on the Sutton Planning Board agenda. We are confident that we can address the concerns raised by Mr. Nunemacher, but just need additional time for the applicant's attorney to prepare the necessary documents. In the meantime, we will also address items discussed by the DPW and the fire chief.
Yes, because I already told them what the fire chief said about ideally wanting it all paved out, but wanting it at least another 30 to 40 feet paved out.
I guess it sounded so simple last meeting, and then it got confused, and then it got complicated. I don't know if any board members went down or had any further thoughts on.
I went down there. I went down there this afternoon or this morning, whatever, and it's pretty much the way it looks laid out. There's one house that's very close to this road, but I guess that's a grandfathered issue, right? I mean, I don't know if it's 5 feet or 8 feet. It's not very far. The road just goes in. It's only like 100 feet long, and then you have to take a left now. A ledge road or lodge road, and then back out this other side. And there are all these relatively small houses. And she said there's worker housing for the mill.
Yep.
And just go straight. And go straight into the woods at this point.
Can you see the road?
No, there's a little bit of gravel.
There's a
but-
little gravelly thing, looks like a driveway or some sort.
Yeah.
It isn't paved like the other road is, but
Yep.
that's there.
Anyone else?
I had visited it on
You found it?
Saturday. I did find it this time. yeah.
Congratulations, all right.
Yeah, so I mean, it just kind of drove down a little bit, and it was just woods ahead, and you trying to
Yeah.
envision what's ahead with it, but
That's it.
Okay. Any, I mean, it's been postponed. Any other comments from the public? Nick, you brought up the questions last time, which was good, made us rethink it. Any further comments?
I think you're gonna have to expect more of these types of things.
Is more coming? Look, thanks for the warning. All right. Okay. Good, then we'll wait, that'll be on the next month's agenda, okay? And we have correspondence, Central Mass Regional Planning
And I
Commission.
know what you're thinking, Wally, tell us about it.
Wally,
But Wally exercised his right to have a life. So I went in his place. And it was the session was about housing, which obviously, as you know from all our housing study work, is very germane these days. And there were two people there, Katie Lacey from Mass Housing Partnership, who talked about planning tools for housing production and different ways you can increase various forms of housing in your community. And then Chris Clutchman from the Department of Housing and Community Development talked about the Housing Choice Program. Housing Choice Program actually gives you funded grants to help develop affordable housing, which is really cool, only you need to be at a certain percentage to be a housing choice community and have enacted some bylaws that encourage different forms of housing. We have have enacted some bylaws that encourage different forms of housing, though we'll look at some more of that. But we aren't even at that minimal base percentage, which I believe is 3%, to try to qualify as a community. So, you know, as we try to produce more affordable housing, it will also garner us some benefits like this, where we can actually get grants funding to help us produce affordable housing and different types of housing. So, the meeting was in the little, it's kind of like a little performance venue at Overlook in Charlton at the assisted living facility there, and it's quite a nice little venue. It holds good 200+ people, and beautiful sound system, and yeah, so it's kind of nice to see those kind of facilities in different communities. The Regional Planning Agency used to have, when it used to be at Union Station, it used to have rooms right there on site that would accommodate this kind of a session, but now they're in the Unum building, and their biggest conference room, I think, holds a dozen people maybe. So they are having to, and actually having to get out into their member communities for these kind of sessions, and have expressed how they're really kind of liking it, because it, you know, it forces you out into the communities, but it also forces other people. So like, you know, I live in Sturbridge, so I'm familiar with Overlook and right next door to Charlton, but I've never been in that part of the building. My father's had stints in the other end of the building, but you know, sometimes I'll go to Shrewsbury, sometimes I'll go into northern central Mass. So having these regional and quarterly meetings in all different communities kind of makes the member communities get to see the rest of Central Mass. So it's been kind of cool, and the staff has actually expressed how they like it too, because they're out in communities a lot, unless they're stuck on a mapping guy or an in-house guy. But so it's kind of neat. It's not great that they don't have big meeting rooms right in their facility in Worcester, but again, they're getting out in the community, and we all are forced to go to all those other communities and check out different locations and some cool restaurants and shops, and yeah, it's neat. So it was a good session, a lot of stuff we kind of know about as we've been working on housing, but finding out that we could get more benefits if we just tack on a little bit more affordable housing. We'll have other pools of funding available to us to help us continue along that path. So, and that was the summary of that.
For the public and the thousands that are watching, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission meets monthly.
Yeah, different
And-
committees.
And
meet
if
every
we,
month.
if we send someone from Sutton to a meeting, they give us,
Local planning assistance.
they give us a local planning assistance for free, not free, but it's stuff that we can use them and not have to pay for it.
Right.
And we're lucky that we have a board member who likes it, because it can be challenging sometimes going to those meetings, so we take advantage. Any questions? I'm wondering, I hear the planning board is gonna create affordable housing, or it's?
No, what usually happens is.
That's right, I'm
I
kinda
mean,
disconnected.
we had an active housing partnership committee here in Sutton. And hopefully, we're in the process right now, we got a grant, a total of 2 grants for $30,000 to produce what's called a housing production plan. So you study what kind of housing is available in Sutton and what kind of demographics are in Sutton. So like Wally has talked to you about in the past, age groups, and we have an aging population older than almost any the median income in all of Central Mass, and older than many of our surrounding communities. So we have a weighted aging population here. So and income brackets, you look at those too. And then you look at the mismatch. So this is what we have for housing stock, and this is what we have for people who live here in their income brackets and their aging needs. And as you might guess, housing in Sutton is way more expensive than a good majority of people in Sutton can technically afford if you look at the census figures. It almost entirely excludes young professionals, and it excludes a lot of seniors, and I'm talking over the age of 70, that bracket in particular, almost entirely. So it places a huge financial burden, and it pigeonholes the population that's in your community. You know, your kids can't stay here because they can't afford to, and seniors can't necessarily afford to keep their big homes, but they don't have any place else to move to within this community, so they're displaced from their hometown as they age, a lot of them. So, so it studies the demographics, there's just the facts. And then it summarizes them for you. This is what you've got in Sutton, this is what you're missing in Sutton, this is what you need to kind of help your existing community. And then it suggests all kinds of different things, bylaw changes that might help, different programs you can take advantage of. And you produce a plan to achieve at least 0.5% additional affordable housing per year. And affordable is those making 80% or below of the median. It's not, like a Section 8 housing level. It's not uber poor, though it could serve uber poor. It's anything 80% of the median income or less. So, so you formulate a plan, and once you have that plan certified by DHCD, it opens up some funding, it opens up some peer assistance, and it really is meant to educate the Board of Selectmen, educate other community groups and the general public where everything stands in town. And as you know, a lot of times when you have housing where young professionals can't live here, that all has an influence on any number of things. Companies locating in the area. We've talked about why we don't have restaurants, and the conversation that I've had with potential restaurants, that there's not a lot of big employers with big employee numbers, and we don't have any denser housing, so our housing numbers are very low, so it's hard to meet the numbers they want within a certain radius. And that has consistently been what I've heard from restaurants who've thought about the area. So at least the larger restaurants, we're very lucky, at least up at the town line, to have one local restaurant who knows the local atmosphere better and took a risk and is doing really well in Brickstone. But that's unique. So we're gonna finish that process, and then you would reinvigorate basically the Housing Partnership Committee. They work in concert with the Board of Selectmen, with the Council on Aging, with the Planning Board, to really pursue the plan on developing and trying to really encourage creation of affordable housing, both on town-owned land, but also working with developers who specialize in that, and really trying to encourage them to come into a town, particularly in the locations and in a way that's compatible with the existing community. The goal is to avoid an unfriendly 40B that can come in and hit you when you're under 10%, and we are woefully under 10%, and
We can't
just
say
have
no.
something jammed down your throat whether you like it or not. So that's kind of the goal, to not be in that position, to be proactive.
What's 80% of the,
Well, it depends, because it's family of one, family of two, family
Oh.
of three. I think a family of two is right around 64,000 right now. Is the
Okay.
median income, so that equates to, put it this way. The affordable housing units inside Leland Hill Estates for a two to four person family, I believe it is, their sales price is $205,000 for what is that, 1,600, 1,700, right
it's
in
about
that
what it
range,
is,
square
yeah.
foot housing. So, 205,000, it's, when you think about it, it can be a kind of a challenge at 64,000. But, so it's interesting, because on that end of the range, there is a very select set of people who will qualify for that, because you have to be doing well enough for a bank to take a chance on you. So, but you can't be doing too well, or you're just gonna get bumped. So,
all right,
so it's interesting stuff. But so yeah, coming out of that study, we will hope to reestablish the Housing Partnership Committee and work with them to move towards housing goals.
next month is, this is a meeting next month? You'll be at?
Oh, yeah, well, there's one coming up at the Salem Cross Inn, I'll definitely be at that one.
All right.
It was pie day when I went, so I did get table top pies and a bottle of water.
You can pick them better.
So we have 5 more minutes from the hearing, and I just wanted to touch on one thing. In the process of reviewing the Pleasant Valley Crossing project, the upcoming Wedgewood Farms project, several projects where uses lie within the watershed overlay districts, we've noticed some weird things about our groundwater protection bylaw. And I kind of had a few things listed on there that we really needed to fix. But when we had our departmental meeting on, in particular, the Armsby Road project, there are some real disconnects in the wording in there. So I have written 3 more articles, that I have advertised for, so I'm going to, I actually think I put them in your file already, but if I did not put them in your file, I will, send those to you. And I just wanted to touch on those with you briefly, so you know what those were. One of them I think you'll remember, but maybe not. One of them's just a housekeeping article. They have the different sections in the groundwater protection bylaw, and the groundwater protection district, if you don't recall, is if you have public water supply wellheads like the Cold Spring Brook wells and the Hatchery Road wells, there is a hydrogeologic study done above ground and underground that tells you where that water comes from. And it's usually a big old amoeba shape. And within the groundwater protection district, within those areas where the water comes from, there's certain uses you don't want to allow. Like you don't have gas stations with underground tanks in those areas. Tank burst, oops, you're in trouble. You don't have hazardous waste facilities. There's certain things you don't allow there. And then around wells that don't do hydrogeologic studies, you have an interim wellhead protection area, which is a certain small distance right around the well that you protect. And then you have a slightly larger area. They're usually in the 100, 200 to 400 foot diameters. So there's, and that's for things like a doctor's office. A doctor's office sees over so many people a day. Their well has to be technically a transient public water supply wellhead with a circle around the well that's protected. So those circles all fall within the groundwater protection district as well. When we were doing Pleasant Valley Crossing, and there are 3 categories: permitted uses, prohibited uses, special permit uses. So, and this is a special permit bylaw. So if you're permitted, you just have to show why you're permitted and why you're not one of the prohibited uses, and then you kind of move on. If you're a special permit use, you file for the special permit and you're granted it. So you'll recall Pleasant Valley Crossing filed for the special permit. The reason we had them file for that is because they weren't specifically listed as a permitted use. But if you looked at the prohibited use section, it said business and industrial uses that have on-site septic over a certain size. And as you know, Pleasant Valley Crossing is tied into the sewer system. So they're not discharging wastewater directly on the site. So by default, they're a permitted use, but one of the things I had on the list was it's open to challenge. We know when you read through it, you know you never intended to prohibit those uses, but it's not clear. It should say in the permitted use section, any use in the use table that's otherwise permitted or special permit, as long as it's not an otherwise prohibited use. So like you can have gas stations in some districts, but you specifically say, no, in this district it's prohibited because we don't need gas spilling into our water supplies. So that was one of the things that was on the list to fix. One of the other things that came up when we were doing the departmental review on Wedgewood Farm was treatment work. So like you have a septic system, like your septic system, my septic system, up to 9,999 gallons. Okay, that's a lot of gallons. It's just a regular old septic system. No advanced treatment, blah, 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 and it's permitted under Title V. And I'm sure you're familiar with the term Title V. Anything at 10,000 gallons per day or more needs what's called a groundwater discharge permit. You have to go to DEP, you have to show them how you're doing advanced treatment of that, how you're protecting the immediate area where discharge is made and any water sources or whatever anywhere around there. So when we were reviewing that, we noticed, a town's consulting engineer actually noticed, wait a minute, I mean, this says you can't do any of those systems anywhere where there's a water source. And I said, is that normal? It seems a little, and he said, that's just not normal. You don't ever prohibit those because they're think about it, you're saying you can have septic systems up to 9,999 gallons, but if you have a system with advanced treatment at 10,000, you can't do it. And I'm like, oh my God, that does make no sense. And so I said, so where do you see it? And he said, it's always a special permit. So then DEP goes through their process, but I, as your consulting engineer or whoever else you want to review it, also gets a secondary review, but you just don't flat out prohibit those. So, so again, that was called into question when we were doing the departmental review of the Wedgewood Farm project. So what you'll see in here is that correction, moving that from a prohibited use to a special permit use in accordance with the recommendations of our consulting engineer. The fix from Pleasant Valley Crossing of specifically saying no. It can be any use that's not otherwise prohibited. That's on sewer and under a certain size of waste, on-site septic. And then the very first one is literally housekeeping. When you look at the bylaw, you know how there's always a purpose section on every bylaw? And then you go through its purpose and where is it, and then what uses are prohibited and allowed. In the use section, it has like a lead-in paragraph that has nothing to do with uses. Like it's kind of like, it should be the paragraph at the beginning. It's almost the purpose statement for the whole section. And so when you read it, it makes no sense with what follows it. So it's just a correction to that lead-in paragraph that talks about uses instead of big fuzzy ideas right before the uses are listed. It just, I don't know. So those 3 articles I did submit on your behalf. If you have any issue with that, obviously, I will pull all of them. Otherwise, they will be on the hearing for the 8th, so that as we go into redevelopment of reworking of phase 3 on the villas, as we go into Wedgewood and any other housing projects, these issues are already cleared up and clarified. So there's just no confusion, because the 2 of the 3 in particular have come up a few times, and they just, they just make no sense and need to be fixed. So
wasn't the aquifer recharge area defined, was the underground aquifer defined,
absolutely,
and Wedgewood falls in that?
a portion of it does.
A portion of it.
Not all of it, but right now, they're trying to find a way to hook to sewer. Unfortunately, right now, they either have to come down 146 within the right-of-way, or obtain a whole bunch of private easements, or come through the villas. And the villas, even though they could have the Wedgewood do cost sharing on their pump station maintenance and stuff, they're a little about it. So the discussion is ongoing, but right now they've designed it with 3 septic systems. And the individual septic systems are 6,000 or 7,000, but if you read the way groundwater recharge law is written, you technically are supposed to add them up. So, and again, even if it was one huge system, basically what our consulting engineer has said is, you just don't, this is advanced level of treatment. You don't just outright prohibit it. You make them go through DEP, and then you also require them to get a special permit from the town as well. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense, especially in towns like Sutton, where your zone 2 areas and your interim wellhead protection areas are significant. So I'm gonna show you right on the screen our layer. And you can look this up yourself, obviously.
Which the highway probably dominates the recharge area, right?
I would imagine.
There's a bunch.
Is that brook or
Oops,
stream
sorry.
or whatever goes underneath there.
Uxbridge, I've got us in Uxbridge, sorry.
And Jen, when you're all done with all this housekeeping,
Huh?
and whenever someone comes in with an idea to do something somewhere, Scott always goes to the
book.
to the book to see if it's an allowed use, because we need to always be consistent.
Right.
If it's not listed as an allowed use,
Not allowed.
we say no.
That's
And
permissive.
that's just something that Sutton's always done. So your corrections will make sure that the things that are allowed will be listed as allowed. You're making,
I mean, we always need improvements.
Right.
Every time we go to review something,
so
every time.
it sounds like good planning to me,
Mm.
as opposed to having someone question whether it's an allowed use or not. It should be clear.
Oh,
It
should
either
be
is
crystal
allowed.
clear, absolutely. And
Yeah.
like I said, when we did PV Crossing, it was like, no, it's allowed because it's not the one that's otherwise prohibited. And it's like,
Yeah, and that's
okay,
what
we
wanna
are all
avoid.
in agreement with that, council was in agreement with that, but you know what, it just needs to say it. It just needs to be very clear. So this is the zone 2 for, see those 2 red dots right there are the Cold Spring Brook wellheads. And these little dots across the street are the doctor's office, the Econo Lodge. And then you have, this dot way down on the bottom there is the country club, Pleasant Valley Country Club. And you can see you've got some circles, but you've got that giant amoeba. See that big ol' amoeba? That is the zone 2. That is the area of hydrogeologic contribution to those Cold Spring Brook
Yeah,
wellheads.
and that was studied and defined.
Studied
That's not
and
arbitrarily
defined.
drawn.
So you can
right.
see on the Armsby Road ones, it
They're-
takes
they're
up a
in it.
good deal.
They're in it.
Mhm.
You know, it takes up a good deal of the parcel. So one of their septic systems is out of it mostly, but 2 of them are in. So, and that's when we went through the departmental review meeting. Right, like I said, that's when Graves Engineering brought this up and said, wait a minute, why is this in this section? This really should be in this section. And that's when he was talking to me about the logic of the 9999 with no treatment is fine, but 10,000 with advanced treatment is not. So I was like, oh my gosh, that does not make sense. So, but anyhow, so, and then you have your other major one is over on Hatchery Road, which is your other major water supply. And that is right, hello, where are you, mister? No. Oh, there it is. See that other amoeba right there?
Right, yeah.
That takes up a whole bunch of the aggregate parcel. That's the other defined zone 2. So
Okay.
again, you can do all kinds of stuff in there. You just can't do things you wouldn't expect. You can't have underground gasoline takes. You can't do hazmat. And if you have parking over a certain size, you'll remember on Pleasant Valley Crossing, they had to do special, not just storm scepter units to pull oil or whatever, or gasoline out of the thing, but then they had to do additional treatment measures as you went into basins to make sure, because there were over so many cars in that parking lot, that what got into that zone 2 was uber clean. So, because you want to protect the water supply.
Okay. 7:30 planning board time.
Okay?
Thank you. Any other questions for Jim?
No.
Questions from the public or comments? Then we have a meeting, we have an agenda item, a public hearing scheduled for 7:30. Scenic Road, 172 Mendon Road. Kyle, you can have the honors. You can read the notice and give it back to me.
In accordance with the provisions of MGL C40, 15C, and C87, 3, Scenic Roadway Law and Public Shade Tree Law, as well as Article 15 of the Sutton General Bylaw, Scenic Roadways, the Planning Board will hold a public hearing on the application of John O'Hara, Worcester, Massachusetts. The applicant requests permission to remove a portion of the stone wall and any trees within the town's right-of-way for the installation of a driveway at 172 Mendon Road. The hearing will be held on the 3rd floor meeting room of the Town Hall, 4 Uxbridge Road, Sutton, Massachusetts, on Monday, March 25th at 7:30 p.m. A copy of the plans and applications can be inspected in the office of the town clerk during normal office hours.
Thank you. Good job. All right.
I think it. Come on up. All right. So I'm just going to give you a little preface.
Hi, John.
Oh, wait,
Good.
So our
Welcome aboard.
applicant is before us initially because he was not aware of the scenic roadway bylaw. We have that issue from time to time. And was notified, whoa, need to stop what you're doing. And he said, his operator said, okay. Called him, came into my office, got the forms, blah, blah, blah. The day that the operator was stopped, the highway superintendent took a bunch of pictures, which you have copies of. We filled out the forms. I've asked for some pictures and stuff back from the applicant. He did send me one big one that I believe I forwarded to you. And then the highway superintendent was out there again today with the building inspector because they were concerned that it looked like some substantially more work had been done. I think a lot of that is the work behind the stone wall, but there definitely was some work done in front of the wall. So we'll take a look at that. But I wanted to put this plan up to show you. Basically, this is what you're trying to accomplish here. See the stone wall in the front? that stone wall is the front property line, it's also the town's right-of-way line. As I think we discussed just briefly when this was filed, the stone wall is not a stacked, super defined stone wall, it's more of the rubble stone wall. And they wanna just create a cut with a radius, to go into, their lot. There was a discussion, it's my understanding, with the tree warden / highway super and the building commissioner, that pipe that's shown here, that you can't install drainage pipes like that in the town's right of way, and really aren't supposed to be grading in the town's right of way without permission, and I know they're working on that, so, and that's really not entirely germane to the board's discussion tonight, but I just wanna let you know that discussion is being had. So, we've got some photographs, and I'll pop those up, but if you just kinda wanna let the board know kinda how things have been going from your perspective.
I hired a tree guy, and I get the phone call from Jennifer saying to stop. By the time I got out there, the work had already been cut into the road. I told him to stop. From that point, the right of the walk, the cut that he cut his road in, or to get his equipment in, all that to the right of the property line is all untouched.
Trying to find the right one here. Okay, there we go. So these are the photographs when we asked work to stop.
Yep.
So you can see,
And it took me about an hour and a half to get back into the
Mhm.
area to get that. He was on his phone, he didn't have his phone working on the equipment. So by the time I got there, he had already cut past the road. So that's where we're at.
yeah. So this is, no, so this is, the highway super went to the site that day, told him to stop, and he said, oh, I'm familiar with those, this is what the highway super told me today. I actually asked him to be here, I don't know where he is. He said he was familiar with that kind of bylaw, fine. He would have a conversation with you and just wouldn't touch anything else on this side of the wall. So, so these are the pictures at the time. So, now if you,
So he told the tree cutter to stop?
he told
Yes.
the,
And it took me about an hour and a half to get me back into the area.
Mhm.
mhm.
And by that time,
Yep.
with that machine, it was gone.
Right, regardless of the fact that the
That he was
highway
told to
super
stop.
told him to stop.
And I was up in Leominster, it took me about an hour and a half to get back down here.
Right.
And from that point, anything to the right of the road after I got there was
Right.
untouched.
So if you look at, this is, you sent me this last week,
Yep.
which was like, oh my God, when you first sent it to me, because it looks, it's probably the worst picture you could have taken of the site.
Yeah.
So these are today. The highway super stood in the same spots and took these pictures today. And this is what's left of a tree stump there. And you can see clearly, you can see roughly where the stone wall is supposed to be, but a lot of that grade has been disturbed. There weren't a ton of trees in there, and when you compare, you can literally compare these photos side by side, and then my building commissioner and my highway super / tree warden were out there today looking at the ground, looking at the photos, and this is a video that the applicant sent me. Basically, they said it would appear that at least one roughly 36-inch tree and two 10-inch trees were removed. The walls were rough to begin with, but have been disturbed even more, moved in some places, buried in others. The width at the pavement is about 26 feet. The width at the property line is about 20 feet of the opening. Both of them told me it doesn't look like the ground cover, other than right either side of the driveway, like beyond that, it doesn't look like the ground cover was really disturbed, just those 3 significant trees cut, maybe a sapling or 2. But they said it looks kind of like the ground cover is still intact, but there is a distance either side of the driveway that's definitely been messed with in terms of soil disturbance. The good thing the building commissioner reported was they're doing some kind of well work And even with the well work, it doesn't look like much is washing to the road at all, at least at the current time. So, you've got some pictures, you've got what the highway super and the building commissioner said. I did let the applicant know, because work was started without permission, because things definitely changed between when that we were asked to stop work and now, that it was not, he should not consider it unusual if the board chose to levy some fines, and or the tree warden, under the public shade tree law. I did let the applicant know that typically driveway breaks are between 15 and 18 feet. The building commissioner did say in this case, because of the grade and the location of the opening, that he personally was fine with the flare being wider, the flare into the road, because then it allows you to exit and kind of really get a good view up and down the roadway, considering the grade of the lot. So that is a little different than some scenic roadway permits you've reviewed that are more level and have better visibility. But that's the long and short of what the deal is right now. So, if you wanna, look at any of these, feel free. But,
John,
Yeah.
thank you for coming in,
No
first of all.
problem.
And I want personally, I'm glad you chose Sutton. I hope you continue to be glad.
I've been in Sutton pretty much all my life, playing at the golf course in Pleasant Valley.
Okay, and for clarification, in a public hearing, you're an item on the agenda. It's
Yeah.
not personal. Things get put on the agenda. The board hears stuff, I ask them to weigh in, and then I ask the public if there's anything that they wanna weigh in on, and then we have to make decisions and pretty much go on to our next agenda item. It appears, and people who know me, I live in Sutton, I have horses. It appears the horse is out of the barn. But you know where it is now, so that's good, we gotta get it back. And, scenic roads are probably one of the reasons why you moved to Sutton. And the scenic road bylaw was created with all good intentions. It's why we're different, and why we look and feel different. So we have legislation that basically says you gotta leave it the way it is. We understand we need wiggle room. Again, we have people who have houses and have horse trailers, and they can't back in. So typically, they wanna do something with the stones. This board will say, how many feet you're taking? Are the stones gonna stay on the property? Can we do something to make sure they stay in town? And it's a simple fix, as opposed to this one, it looks like it's been removed. So I'm not sure the stones are still, I think the stones are still there. It doesn't look to me like you had someone come in and buy the stones,
No.
by the pound or something. So that's good news. But we gotta try to move it back to make sure that we answer to everyone in town
Yeah.
that buys property, to make sure that it gets back to look the way it's supposed to. So,
And I totally agree, and, as I took a picture of my neighbor's wall that was right next door, and I kinda took the video going down, I just don't know, where the wall, or how the wall should be structured. Is it a little bit here, a little bit there? I just don't know.
okay, all right. So that's how it works. I'll ask board members to weigh in a little bit, and then I'll ask the public
Yeah.
to weigh in.
I just have a question, I've been in town for a long time, and because I'm here, I know what the bylaw is about. If I didn't know about the bylaw, I could see myself cutting down a tree. I would assume that there's a building permit that's been applied for.
I haven't seen it.
There's no
No.
building permit at this time, you're just clearing land.
Correct.
So the tree cutter, is he local?
He is from Rutland, Mass.
So you can clear your property, but we have other rules and regulations. So if there was a building permit, I'd like to think that people would know, or be told, or receive a
It gets
packet or
flagged,
something.
because the bylaw, when you apply for a building permit, it goes to a list of departments and I'm one of them. So if you're on a scenic road, I actually have a scenic road checkbox.
Okay.
And I'll check it off and put a star
So
and
that was my question, there
Yes.
was no permit, so it's not, yes, I'm fully aware of that, I chose to ignore it 100%,
Yeah.
right? Okay. This is a pretty dramatic thing.
I think it looks more dramatic too, because they did ask, you know, well, can we keep clearing? I said, yeah, I mean, if you don't do anything else to that break, you know, you already made a break, just, yeah, you can go in and do anything on your property you want, just, you can't touch anything else between that wall and the road. And it's clear from the photos from the highway super that some things were touched between there and the road, and that's the bigger problem. It looks really stark, because when you look at it, the lot's cleared, so it looks like, whoa, you know? So I really think that's why it looks more stark, but it is what it is. There are trees, town public shade trees missing in that strip. They just are.
Okay. We have two new board members, so they've never seen one of these before. But any other board members any comments? Or?
No, I was just gonna ask, pretty much what Scott asked.
Okay, all right. Anyone from the public that wants to weigh in? And just for the record, if you give us your name and your address.
Yep, Alice Russell, 176 Mendon Road.
That's across the street? Beside it? Next door?
Up there.
Okay. Thanks for coming in, Alex.
Just referring to the wall, I mean, there really was no wall there. I mean, you can call it a wall. There's a few stones. That wall's been, I've been there 50 years, and, I mean, there's a few stones left, but that wall has been gone forever. You know, I mean, you couldn't really call it a wall. There's a few boulders left down along the runway there, but there's really no wall there.
Okay. Thanks for coming in. Anyone else? No? Then it goes back to us. And we have to, obviously we want to make sure that whatever we decide to do tonight can't be, we don't want to set precedent, if you will. We want to make sure everyone gets treated the same way.
Absolutely.
It's embarrassing when we say, if you cut down a tree that's big, there'll be a fine. But the most the fine can be is $300
On one
tree.
Well, under the scenic roadway.
Under the scenic
Yeah.
roadway thing, which leaves
Public
me
shade
as a
tree.
board member saying, oh, big deal, cut the damn tree down and give him $300. I want the tree gone. We need to work on that. That's crazy.
Yeah,
You
well-
talk about having no teeth. The wall, for removing of the wall, what's the fine? Heck, if someone had to give me $1,000 for all those rocks that don't even look like a wall, I'll pay the $300 fine. I'll make $3,000 because they want some Sutton stone. So we're in.
I would assume other towns have scenic bylaws,
Yeah, here's the deal.
and so I'm wondering why the tree cutter would know better.
Yeah, that's.
Why did he not know better?
Well, according to the highway super, he said he was familiar with that type of bylaw. It didn't seem like he knew we had one in Sutton, although there is a scenic road sign on each end of Mendon Road, so you had to drive fast.
So you'd have to read
So-
that.
Yeah,
So
but
you had to drive fast. But the thing about the fines is there's three kinds of fines. On a scenic roadway, under state law, you're capped at $300. So if you disturb a stone wall, that's $300. If you cut a tree, it's $300 per tree. So they can be stacked. Under public shade tree law, there's two different fine systems that apply, but the tree warden really has kind of the purview over that. He's the one that should calculate fines under that. The first one is $500 per tree under one statute, and the other one, which I just learned about today from council, is chapter 242, section 7, trespass to public trees, which is the tree warden places a value on the trees based on the value of, the potential timber value, and then it's triple damages. And he had said that to me today, and that's why I called council, because I'd never heard of that, but he was with the Millbury DPW, and he said, no, it was always, when I was in Millbury, it was always triple damages. We'd do evaluation of the tree, or an arborist would, and then it's triple damages, and I was like, what are you talking about? So I called council, and I'm like, has he lost his mind? And he said, no, that section is completely within the purview of the tree warden as well. So, but again, we have a tree warden, he has the ability to do that, he doesn't have any purview under the scenic roadway bylaw. So my suggestion was, in terms of the fine, levy whatever fines you're gonna levy for the wall, and then just, make a motion to let the tree warden determine what is the appropriate fines in terms of the tree removal, and whatever he says goes, and that money goes into a planting and maintenance account for all town trees. And then you have to decide, so that needs to be one motion. The second motion is whether you're going to approve this. I mean, he needs to get into his lots, so I guess you pretty much do. But then you have to decide in terms of what you see on the pictures, do you think anything needs to be replanted, or stabilized, or anything else? And you need to take that into consideration as the planning board with respect to the public shade tree law, and he has asked you, what do I do with the wall? The gentleman that spoke, if you go out there, he's right, it's a rubble wall. We've seen it on lots of other scenic, some you get obvious walls, and some you can just see the remnants of the wall. This one, you can see it, and then you don't see it, and then you see it, and then you don't see it.
And that's why I took the video from.
Right, and you
all the
can
way
see
down
it
to
in the pictures too. Near the property line, there's an exaggerated pile of stones kind of near the pin. But you can see coming right up to it, it's like a one layer of stone coming up to it that with the leaves, if the leaves were
Right.
falling, you probably wouldn't see those stones. But a little farther down on the neighbor's property, it's like 4 or 5 stones high for a while. And it's definitely a kind of an intermittent. So you need to give him some direction on what he should do to kind of put that back for.
In also, in other incidents like this, trees get replanted someplace else.
Yeah, you
That's
can do that as well. You can do it.
because they need a tree at the school. I mean, there's, cases where the tree's gone already and they don't want to put another tree up there. They took it down because they didn't want the tree there. So they plant the tree someplace else in town where they need one. And that's an expense, but that's something else that's happened in the past. But I guess I'll ask each board member to weigh in on what are your thoughts on this? Kyle, I'll start with you because you're sitting to the right of me tonight. What do you think?
I said we let the tree warden deal with the tree fines, because he probably knows more than, at least I know on that, so. And then
How about the rocks?
maybe stack them on the continuation of the wall where there's a higher section, so you said on one side of the property there's,
Well, on the neighbor's property.
oh, okay, so.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want them to go out and buy
No,
stones,
no.
No.
but, maybe just kind of, once the grading work is done in accordance with whatever you agree with the tree warden, that maybe you just kind of try to, especially right against the driveway or near the driveway, kind of reestablish that there was a wall there, so you can kind of see where the property line was, but in the same fashion. 3 stones here, down to 2, down to 1, kind of like you see. So it looks like the pictures.
Mike?
I would pretty much kind of agree with Kyle as well. I mean, it's, from the pictures, it doesn't look like a clearly established wall was there going 4 feet, the wall, obviously. So, making an effort to take the stones that are available, and kind of putting them back, like,
Yep.
she had just said would, probably be the best case at this point. Not rebuilding a wall that wasn't there when it started even, I mean, but just putting them in some order,
Yeah.
I think would be at least bringing
Fire
it back a
pit.
little bit,
Use the rocks for
Or
something.
fire.
Go ahead, Wally.
I would agree with that, that opinion. Try to get them back closer to the drive, each side of the driveway perhaps.
I mean,
See
only
the-
because the stones were a property boundary marker.
That you're not supposed to move.
That you're not supposed to touch. Yeah, and granted, there wasn't much of it left, it was definitely sketchy, but you can see when you stand, especially when you look towards one of the pins, you can see the ground level rocks that dead straight as you approach the boundary pin. Then there's just none for a while, and then one will pick up that's bigger than other rocks you see in the area, and you're like, somebody popped that there to kind of mark that line. So,
Well, I think that from the tree standpoint, we should maximize the fine. To me, this is done by a professional who should know better, who was directed by somebody to either do this or to just do whatever he wanted and ignored the town of Sutton telling him to stop. So to me, that warrants the maximum fine possible. I don't care about the stones.
Marion?
That makes a lot of sense. I was wondering, is it a fine only, or is it fine and replication, I guess?
well, the
But
fine
where the
is a
stone-
separate issue.
Yeah, where the stone is, I agree that just a messy wall. It's already been harvested, who knows where those rocks went. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a scenic road for a reason, right?
Right.
And now this has substantially been disturbed
Yeah.
in the public right away.
And I guess that it's like, to what extent do we restore the wall? And that's, is it just take what rocks, what material is there and, create something that's not very attractive, or, there's some discussion perhaps there, I don't know.
And maybe we can, and we don't know what the plan is for this property or what the grading's gonna look like ultimately in the end anyway, so we're.
We have a plan from the septic plan, and I don't know if that's been approved by the Board of Health yet.
Yes.
Okay, so, but again, when I showed you the plan, there's some piping and some grading in the town's right of way that hasn't been, that you can't have the piping in the town's right of way.
That's how the plan was submitted?
Yeah, so the Board of Health doesn't.
I mean, who's making plans? Anybody
Yeah,
knows
I
that,
don't know,
right?
I didn't
Anybody who-
necessarily recognize the name.
Anybody who should do this
Southern
kind of
engineer.
designing should understand that.
So you can see on the plan that pipe can't go there, and that grading that's shown in there, can't go in there without agreement from the town, so, it's my understanding there's gonna be some ongoing discussion
Right.
with the building commissioner and the highway superintendent about how this drainage is dealt with. The building commissioner in particular has substantial concerns about the fact that if you look at the topo, everything's sheeting towards the road, and he's really worried about that.
Yeah, this is gonna be a mess.
Right, so he's thrilled right now that everything's still pretty stable and they're just not getting the runoff, so that's great. But he's worried about kind of the long-term effects, so I know he'll be working with the applicant on that.
Just as a point of clarification, I assume these are supposed to be stamp drawings?
Yeah, they should be.
Well,
I would
they're not.
assume what
They're
went
not.
into the Board of Health was
This
stamped.
version is not.
This is the one I sent in to the Board of Health.
Is stamped by, anybody?
Septic engineer, should be.
Yeah.
So this copy is not. No, this is the stamp right here.
That's the same.
He assigned it. But that's about as all that. It doesn't need to be stamped.
So
The
hopefully-
designer, the engineer, or I don't know who would be designing this, what discipline necessarily.
As
And
the
that's
septic-
where.
And why, this is not just a question, why would the Board of Health approve it?
That's why I'm asking this
Yes.
question.
Yeah, hopefully
So let's
because
stay,
they have-
let's stay with planning, let's stay with,
Okay.
John, we'll stay with planning board stuff.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
I guess I'd like to get two motions. The first motion will deal with the rocks.
Well, now scenic roadway is the wall and the trees. So the deal is,
Can we
and the maximum fine you can do under the scenic roadway file is $300 for disturbance of a wall and $300 per tree.
How many trees?
They reported 3 to me. They said there were some small ones that might have been, but they were looking for anything like 6 inches and up.
Look,
Even though-
in the-
And we
In the town.
recognize, I mean, clearly, there's not much left of the wall. I see the challenge for you is to do something with the stone. The stones that are there should somehow stay on your property
Yeah.
as a boundary wall, and whatever you choose to do.
Again,
makes it,
I'm-
you should, don't bring stones in and don't get rid of it. You don't have much to work with this, but that's,
You could bring stones in if you found ones that are kind of similar and
it's
just,
not scenic. We've already
but yeah, I mean, there's no need if you just kind
Yeah.
of drive up and down like you did.
Right.
And kind of
spent
see.
enough money already without,
Just so you have an indication.
yeah.
of
And for
where
the
it
tree
was.
guy, if you haven't paid him yet, it might, it's, have him, consider redoing the bill, because clearly, if I wanted my house painted red and they painted it white, I'll pay you for the labor, but you did the wrong color, buddy, you know, that's, so you have a leg to stand on there. So you want one motion?
No, you do one for the, whatever the fine you want to levy, and the second one is an approval with whatever conditions you think are appropriate. And to Miriam's question, it is completely up to you. If you think anything should be replanted, or you want to try to give them some loose guidance on the wall, just include that in your motion. You can also say, you know, you can, have him consult with the tree warden on whether the tree warden thinks tree replacements are appropriate in that location or not.
Or I can donate some to the town, or whatever you,
Right.
whatever you like to do.
And the.
We gotta get off this page
Yeah.
and get built,
All right. Then I'll make
because
a mo-
winter's coming.
Since I'm the one that started that part of the conversation, I make a motion that relative to the destruction and disturbance of the wall and the taking down of 3 trees, that we maximize the fine that we can, as the planning board, levy on that, which is 500 plus 3 times 300?
No, it's 300 per tree
Tree.
and 300 for the wall. So
300
12.
plus 3 times 300 for the 3
Right.
trees.
And then with respect to the remaining fines, you would just leave, under the public shade tree, you'd leave those to the tree warden.
I would, and then relative to that other Mass General law, the decision to be made by the tree warden of town of Sutton.
Okay. Can I get a second? Thank you. Any further discussion from the board?
Molly, will you go second?
Any further discussion from the public? Got 2. Your name, please.
Todd
and-
Winchell,
Thank you.
167 Menden Road.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just have a question about the disruption, and she said there wasn't much erosion, but it's getting muckier and I already see it coming down the road. Can we put any restriction on the runoff? Because it's already coming down and hitting the rest of the road that I drive over, and so I'm just curious about that part.
I'm not sure if the building commissioner talked to you about, like a tire scrubber surface at the end there today. They mentioned that to me. A lot of times, especially when you have, I'm going to your image here, let me see if I can find your image. A lot of times, so you're on a slope. A lot of times when you're on a slope where you would join the road, see how there's all these little rocks? They don't really catch anything. So you kind of dig down just a little bit and you put in the larger riprap for a good distance back, and then as stuff sheets down, the velocity slows and a lot of it gets caught, and or it scrubs tires. The other thing we do is the wood chip. Remember that we did on Forest Edge? We do the wood chip surface, so I would consult with the building commissioner and see what he wants done there, but it's illegal to run stuff into the roadway like that, so they'll be keeping an eye on that, and so you might wanna just consult with the highway super and the building commissioner about it.
I've already seen the tar washing down a little bit, so I just figured I'd ask since I'm here.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, so work with the highway super and the building commissioner to put in either the tire scrubbers and or the mulch. You know, they, depending on where the runoff is happening, they may want you to do some swales just to kind of catch it so it doesn't hit the road while you're doing construction.
So there'll be an addition to the motion that something will be put in place to deal with runoff.
Yeah, and you can do that during your next motion where you approve the change with conditions.
Okay.
You could always deny the change, by the way. That is an option, but I don't know where you go from there.
Had another comment.
I would ask these 3 gentlemen here, since they're familiar with the area, how big was the tree that was cut? And was it dead, like so many trees along side of the roads that have been decimated by caterpillars?
That's Nick Nunemacher in the back.
I do have
All right.
pictures of that.
Robert Nunemacher, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do have pictures of that, and it did look pretty
We were pretty good, we were pretty lucky.
healthy.
How big was the tree?
There's a lot of dead ones in front of my house.
The building
They don't
commissioner,
like to stop on the corner to clear anything out, so there's all dead ones up along my, in front of me.
the building commissioner estimated it over 3 feet.
So we'll go with 3.
The highway superintendent had a slightly smaller number, but not much. And they both thought 8 to 10 on the other two.
And you didn't get there in time, John, to measure it.
There is a thing still out there. There is a
There's stuff
stump
out
still out there.
Does the tree guy charge you by the tree, or does he charge you for the job?
Good job.
Okay, so,
So
You know what he'll say.
There's a call happening.
don't, try to sell you firewood.
Yeah.
He just cuts it up, splits it.
I'll give you some free firewood.
Any other comments? Okay,
Oh, no,
Go
we're
ahead.
talking about just the trees
Just the-
now. Okay, I'll save it for later.
okay. We had a motion and a second. We've had discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Okay,
There
so
you
that's
go.
the fine motion. So now the approval with conditions or disapproval.
Approval of,
So you're approving the alteration to the scenic road that's already been made. You have to decide a number of things. The first thing you need to decide is, if you're okay with the width of the cut that's been made, or if you're going to require some reduction in the width. You can see the width there on that. Like I said, the building commissioner measured at the pavement edge, which is in the town's right of way, over 25 feet. He said when he went back to the stake, you can see the stake where the property line is, see it? When he measured there, that's about 20 feet, he said. I think your largest one so far has been 20 feet. And he did make the comment that in this location, with the land, the way it comes down, and just visibility in both directions, that he actually preferred the radiuses, the wider radiuses to the road, because it just allows you to kind of pull the front end around and get a better look up and down the road. So first, if you're okay with the width of that cut, is one of the first things. And I would put a specific number to it. And those are the only numbers I have right now, are 20 feet at the property line and in excess at the, in excess of 25 at the pavement edge. And then, what you want them to do with the stones, if you want them to do any replanting or consult with the tree warden on that.
Marion?
As far as the stones go, I was just going to add that if you do bring in stones, that they're, or bring them from another property in town, that they're in keeping with what's sort of a country stone wall,
Yeah.
you know, not a fussy.
No, yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Absolutely.
so the plan that you submitted is for the septic system?
Septic design.
Which has a driveway and a grading plan attached to it,
Correct.
and they approved that?
The Board of Health approved the septic design. When the building commissioner and the highway superintendent saw it, they said, whoa, 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 with the pipes and the grading in the town's right of way.
So for
So-
that reason, I don't know that we should move on this at this time. I think we should extend this portion of the hearing until some of these guys resolve this stuff. I don't wanna make a decision here and have highway or building have issues with, or problems, or want alterations to that plan.
I'll hear from you, but, yeah, for safety and for when the police chief looks at it and wants to make sure you have a clear view up and down the street, that's something he's gonna say in the future, and if it's fine with him, it's fine with me. We find that with driveways that are over 500 feet long, not allowed unless you get permission from the fire department, the police, the safety personnel.
This is
Yeah,
this is the tough clearance.
Yeah.
This is the S curve that's down there.
yeah, so
The road. This is
so
not gonna
there's-
be a good site no matter what you
other
do.
people are gonna have to say this is as good as we can get.
Good as
And
we can
it
get.
sounds like a wider than usual opening makes sense, but I like what you're saying. Let
All the
them-
neighbors go nice and slow, right?
You know,
Well, especially on the north side of Up on the right side of it, the road's pretty
Road
bad up
is
there.
really
You have to go slow.
It's just really bad. I know, we're going left. We're not going right.
Wally?
Yeah, I was up there today. I do notice that I was going in this direction, I guess towards the east. I noticed there is water coming down, not necessarily from this location, but there's just water on the road because the right-hand side is much higher than
My
the
driveway's
left.
completely blind coming out of the right-hand side. I have
Yeah.
one left, I can't see anything. The banking's too high coming out of my driveway, so you can't see. At least he's got a space. He can
He's got a
see
space.
up and down. I can't see. I have to go into the road to see down, up and down in my driveway.
But the building inspector, somebody's gonna decide, you know, if there's water coming out of here, it's gonna be ice for 3 or 4 months on a bad curve for the, you know, for the, just even you coming out of the driveway and the neighbors, you know, it's.
I'm in the snow business, so it won't be.
Oh, that won't be,
Be no
okay.
snow here.
Mike?
I think that, the enlargement of the opening seems to be a good point. I mean, useful, it happened and now it's a little wider and it's a little safety
Okay.
help on that end, you know. I also concur about, possibly having to wait a little bit until the other things are ironed out because it seems like those are points that need to be, addressed. You know,
Okay.
the piping coming through that area.
Yep,
I agree with that, Mike.
all right.
On the
So
Arlington
if we
side.
postpone,
Continue.
for one meeting, 2 meetings, how much
I
time?
think two.
Yeah.
We got a
Yeah,
lot
because he
next time.
still has access, he's just gonna get delayed on, you know, there's nothing, if you don't decide on anything now, it's not gonna stop him from doing anything.
Right.
He'll have time now to work with the highway super and the building commissioner
And the engineer.
and the engineer on
With a
what
stamp.
needs to be done.
Yeah, that's- I don't pay him unless he has a stamp on
Your
it.
tree guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Long conversation.
The special work with
Um,
him.
Well, thank you for coming in.
So we need to
we'll meet you
continue
again
to a dime
In
and
much
meet
better
soon.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you won't, because it should be a note. If all the other people do their jobs, we'll be asked to approve this, but there'll be no pipes in the right of way. There'll be a recommendation from the police that say it should be wide so he has a better view when he's coming and going off his property. It should go smoother next time. All right.
So I'll make a motion, we extend this public hearing on the,
Second meeting in
what
April,
is this, public?
172.
April 22
Till April
Yeah, on the-
22nd?
On the
at 7:10.
scenic bylaw, public hearing.
Any questions for us?
No, I just wanted to go smoothly and.
Yeah.
That's it. It is what it is, but, you know, I'm glad I'm in town.
Yeah.
I'll make it.
And we're fortunate, Fluckery is, Jen, we have a planner that's on staff that works for all of us. You're a taxpayer in town, she works for you. She's very accessible. You can come in anytime, and she'll tell you how it works. That's not against the law, that's not cheating, that's just finding out, and, you know, if anything looks like it's moving and there could be a question, don't hesitate to call her. She'll give you her number and make contact. Good. We'll close the hearing? Oh, no, we won't close it, we'll
Second.
continue it.
Continue it.
Who was the second? Molly?
And the date is
4/22 at 7:10.
4/22. And if you need to move it, just let her know, we can move it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, no, we can't just move it, we
Well,
have
we'll
to come back.
let
to
her
it on
know
the
so we can move
22nd.
it. Yeah, if it's not gonna happen.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Do you see it?
I want to get it done as fast as possible, so.
All right, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
All right, so we'll see you back on the 22nd, and hopefully I'll see you in between.
New
and/or
pictures.
You and the building commissioner and the highway super, and
Not bad.
we can chat.
When do I start paying fines?
I'll send you a letter. Okay, I'll send you a letter.
Thank you.
That'll get CC to the building commissioner and the highway, the tree warden.
Yes.
And then you'll be in contact with him, and he'll give you a evaluation on his end of things.
Okay.
Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Get
need
a
to
second?
sign one thing, but-
Second.
Second, thank you. Michael's the
Good
second.
night.
All those in favor?
Michael?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained.
Who's the motion on?
Motion to adjourn, second by Mike.
Time?
8:20. Yeah, we can do it.
Okay, I don't need a motion on this. This is just the preliminary plan that you approved already, so just sign it for our records. Here, black pen. So, endorse away, just those two
Sign
copies.
that.
And there's, of course, the title, the signature blocks are in a different place on every page as usual.
Everyone signs?
Yes. Well, except for cut.
Start down there. Let's-
Do you like my
We're still
pen?
in the meeting.
Not bad. Could have been awful.
You're on over.
Yes.
I mean, it could have been really, we've had people come in, get real mad.
Put mine right on the